what this leads me to is I see you guys on the news. I'm going, man, instinctively I can tell, but these guys must have some information. These guys must have the data or something. They're armed with something. And I was like, through those weeks, I was like, there's got to be more. Then I hear about this December 18th meeting. And CNN, I just watched the clip. I think you tweeted about it yesterday. That CNN clip says Jack Smith is focusing on your meeting, and he's got a picture with all the people who were in that meeting, and all these quotes from all these people saying how chaotic it was, and there was screaming and all of this dramatic stuff. And I'm going, why aren't they asking Patrick?
They don't even mention my name. It's kind of funny. Have you noticed that? This should tell you what the dog that didn't bark is.
Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes. They, when they had the J6 committee got started, there was a opening speech from Liz Cheney, and she in that speech, you should look this up. It's a funny clip. You should look this up. She even says something like, and on December 18th, the Oval Office was penetrated by General Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell, and someone else.
Right, right.
And when the U.S. Congress under the Democrats, had an oversight hearing into Maricopa, the Maricopa audit. And 3 times that hearing, the chairwoman and then 2 other Democratic Congress members, said in that hearing stuff like, and we know who's behind all this. It's that eccentric millionaire who's behind this whole lot, but they wouldn't say my name.
Right.
It's kind of funny. General Flynn came in, or after each of those events, I would see him. And I've never seen him laugh so hard. I saw him in a parking lot, doubled over, laughing, saying, "This is they can't say your name." And I kept telling him it's kryptonite to them. They can't say my name. They'll probably kill me before too long because it is so toxic to them.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw, by the way, going back to the Jack Smith thing.
Yeah.
I did tweet out. I heard about someone sent me a link to that thing from yesterday. Mm-hmm. So today I put up a tweet saying, hey, Jack Smith, I'll take very respectful. I take all responsibility for the whole meeting. Put it all on me. Have me in. We'll talk about it. We'll clear this up. And I see that just a few hours ago, CNN ran my tweet on CNN. I've never had anyone do a story about something I tweeted.
Wow. Now you're.
And I'm offering, hey, I take all responsibility.
Yeah.
Take all responsibility. Have me in.
And so what's interesting, I've heard you tell the story about that meeting before, and for all the details, get the Capital Times Magazine article to read all the details in there. And I'm thinking, you guys must have all this great data. You guys must have the behind-the-scenes stuff. And when I'm reading this, I'm like, you actually had government reports and statements by the government, like in October.
Correct.
And tell me a little bit about that, because I find completely fascinating. You weren't like, you didn't have some nefarious data that was from over here and whatever. And
not a single thing about that meeting has been reported correctly. Not a single thing about that meeting had anything to do with what the press has tried to ridicule. Not a single thing in that meeting was any theories of vote flipping from space or South Korean jets stuffed with ballots. Not a single thing in that meeting. It was 100% documents from the government, about 5 documents. The DHS itself, on October 9th of 2020, they gave their annual report where they said, I think it was like page 7, that one of the main threats is foreign adversaries are going to hack our election. Then, that was that they're going to. That's not conclusive of anything.
Right.
But then on October 21st, I think they put out something that says Iran is trying to hack our elections, and they've got advanced persistent threat actors, blah, blah, blah. Then on November 3rd, they put out a statement, DHS FBI put out a statement that said one state had been successfully hacked, and they were going after other states, and there are other foreign adversaries now involved in helping. Well, and then you get to December 6th, and the government put out a statement that said, basically alerted to a massive cyber security attack. And then on December 13th, they came out with a statement that basically said, that everything had been hacked in the United States. Out of 500 Fortune 500 companies, 425 were hacked. the CIA, NSA, DOD, State Department, blah, 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 everything, all of those were hacked because they all used one product. They all used a product called SolarWinds network security product, which was called Orion. And that turned out to have big holes in it. And by the way, in March of 2021, the government came out and said, yep, it was Russian FSB was behind this. So why that's important? So our argument was that based on, it was actually something Barack Obama signed, that President Obama signed something that said, if a foreign adversary interferes in the election, here's an executive order that says a president can do pretty much anything he wants. He can rerun the election. He can do anything. He has extraordinary, he can have a quick investigation. He can have a big investigation. He can rerun. He can do all kinds of things. So we wanted to make the argument that, now I'm going to put this in as an aside. I just do want to mention, here's the hacked product, which is the SolarWinds Orion product. They have another product I'm not going to go into. It's called the Serve You product. And it's used everywhere in this election stuff. Everywhere these election machines are tied together with this other product. But when the election people were asked, once this announcement was made, you have the Orion product, the CEO of one company, Dominion, said under oath, we don't use the SolarWinds Orion product. He neglected to say, we do use the SolarWinds Serve You product, and the hacked Orion product is like the foundation of this other product. So all the system that is used, the product that they do use has within it the product that was hacked, which means anyone who had the key to hack this had the key to hack the system that is in use throughout our election industry. It says the Serve You product. So that was nonsense. So our whole goal was just to say, even setting that little nugget aside, was to say, Mr. President, Barack Obama signed an order that gives the president power to, if there's foreign interference in an election, to investigate, to do all kinds of things. Here, the federal government itself in the last 8 weeks has come out and said this and this and this. And by November 3rd, they said there had been a successful hack against one state and they're going after other states. There's other nations now helping the attack. They came out December 6th, and by December 13th, they were saying everything had been hacked. Based on that set of statements from the government, and based on what Barack Obama signed, and you, Donald Trump, sort of, I think he extended it, you got the authority to have an investigation, and all we're asking you to do is let's investigate for 2 weeks. By the way, we actually think we can get it done in a week. That was basically the whole pitch.
Yeah.
And, does that sound so extreme to you? I mean, I knew that we would be in this situation where the whole country, half the country or more, suspects we have a fake president. But if we spent a week, we could go and get to the bottom of it and find out and be through this. So anyway, they call that extreme. I think their answer was extreme.
That's just, I mean, so when I was reading that, I was like, yeah, the information you brought into that meeting was stuff that was in the public anyways, basically. And they're trying to make it out to be 100%. Some nefarious thing. And
100% of it was public statements from the government over the previous. In fact, Trump got pissed at his lawyers and said, why haven't you told me about this?
Right.
Why haven't you told me that I had the power to do this? Why haven't you told me about this? And his own lawyer said, that's when he gave up on his lawyer. That's when Pat Cipollone said, there was like this hemming and hawing, and Pat Cipollone said, well, Mr. President, we're your White House attorneys. We're not your campaign attorneys.
Oh, geez.
Right. That's just what happened. Everyone in the room sat back and was like, that was one of those moments that in the conversation, it was just like that. And that's when Michael Flynn, and listen, Michael Flynn's a real gentleman. He's a real gentleman. The only people screaming were these the only raised voices came from these lawyers. It was at that point, there were probably 3 or 4 points I could explain like that, where like they lost one section of an argument and everyone in the room knew it. The president knew it. We all knew it. The lawyers knew that they looked stupid.
Yeah.
And at one of those points, the final one, is when General Flynn, now the lawyers were standing. Actually, one of them, One was standing, two were seated behind me. One was standing and being loud. And eventually a second one stood. And only then did General Flynn stand up. But even then, he was very graceful. He reminded me so much of this professor, frankly, I had at Stanford, a guy named Etchemendy. Very similar. It's funny. Some people, when they get really angry, get very quiet and gentle. And what I saw then is that's what Mike Flynn does. He got he did get to his feet. They were on his feet, but he jumped up like a surfer. It was I see how athletic he is. I'll never forget that. He jumped out of his seat, but like a surfer popping up on a board. It was very, very light. I was like lithe, I think is the word. Mm-hmm. And he said, if anything, he overcompensated by being very quiet. He goes, can I just ask people in the room? Can I just ask Pat Cipollone, what do you think happened on November 3rd? Do you think anything unusual happened in the election? It was just like that. He was like it was just like my old friend, teacher Etchemendy, who would sort of in the middle of a class jump up to the board and want to go write something. Mike jumped up, but very not aggressively towards them, and was just very professorial. And he said, like when the guy had said something that outrageously obstinate, stupid, that's when he got to his feet and said, let's what do we think happened on November 3rd? Pat Cipollone, do you think anything unusual happened on it? It was just like that. It was Cipollone, and then the really aggressive, the aggression came from, the verbal aggression came from Pat Cipollone, especially to a woman. And I probably should have stood up a little bit earlier. He said some aggressive stuff to a woman, or not aggressive, super unprofessional, insulting to a woman who was there. I'm not going to say who or what it was about. But it was when Mike Flynn did that this other guy, I think his name's Eric or Derek. He's a bigger guy. He's a big and a solid guy. He's a solid guy. And he kind of did try to bump up on Mike Flynn. He walked around and sort of tried to, and he's a big solid guy. And he did it looked for a moment, he was trying to intimidate Mike Flynn. And that's when I jumped up. And it's funny, in half a second, if it had gone on for 1/2 a second more, there would have been a fist fight, because I jumped between them, but stepped to the side, and his face was like this, sort of 3 feet away from Mike Flynn. And I said, in situations like this, you don't want to be, am I digressing too much?
No. Keep going.
That in situations like that, the trick is you set a trigger. You don't let somebody do something and then think, oh, is that crossing a line or not? Because the act of thinking slows you down, and then and lets them do another thing, and then you think again, oh, is that crossing a line? You set the line, and you say that's the trigger. And if the guy crosses that line, I'm reacting. And I set the line, and he just leaned into it. And I swear, I had just sent like the instructions to my arm. I was punching him a knuckle punch right in the throat, and I just started to go when President Trump said, "Hey, everybody, calm down. Let's everyone take a break." So we were within half a second. I was about to chop this guy in the throat, which he was. I think it's called in law menacing. I was trying to decide, which actually probably saved me. I was trying to decide whether to go for a mush or a punch in the throat. And in that act of deciding, and the mush would have been more appropriate, but just then Trump shot. But if it got a half a second more, it would have been one of the two. I was just starting to move on it when President spoke up.
That's a lot
so
of
the
thought.
only guys who raised their voice was Derek and Pat Cipollone, and the president when he kept me from chopping this guy in the throat.
That's a lot of thought processes in half a second. My goodness.
Well, you've been in fights. I'm sure you know how.
Yeah. So
it was funny.
Wow. How easy it would have been.
And then Mike said, "Hey, this is not a contest to see who's taller."
Right.
And the lawyers stormed out of the room 3 times. They stormed out of the Oval Office. All 3. Each time they lost one of these little modules, they jumped up and they would storm out of the Oval Office and chatter out there and come back in 5 minutes later with some new argument.
Wow. So what they said on CNN was Jack Smith is now talking about this December 18th meeting, and are they calling people in, and are they going to get to the bottom of it and all this stuff?
Don't collect.
Just ask
Call
Patrick.
collect, Jack. Hey, I'm right here. I'm in Italy. I'm in Milan. I'm in the fabulous Armani Hotel right now in Milan. You can tell because it's so hip. Call collect. I'll be in there. I'll take all responsibility. The whole meeting. None of the meeting would have happened if it weren't for me. I lied to make the meeting happen.
Yeah, it was
I don't
quite
understand
a
how
quite a White House tour you got.
Yeah, Garrett Ziegler and another young fellow whom I'd met, both of them, I think I'd met about 3 or 4 times over those 2 months. I look back, I played, I replay my decisions thinking, how could I have done things better or looking back, there were opportunities I may have missed. But anyway, they had been, each time I saw them over those 2 months, they said, hey, give us a call someday. Come over, we'll give you a White House tour.
Right.
So it was actually after December 13th, which I think was a Sunday, when the government came out with this statement about the SolarWinds hack. Maybe it was a Monday. By then, we saw this. We said that easily, if there's a scale, and you got pebbles on both sides of the scale, we had all these other pebbles that I've walked through, the DHS October 6th and DHS October 21st and the FBI DHS. But when you got to that was like putting a brick on the scale. Once they came out with that statement, we were saying, let's try to get in. Let's try to get in and explain to the president. He's got this power. Nobody seems to have informed him. He's got the power to just ask there to be a quick investigation. And finally on Friday, we couldn't get in. And on Friday, I finally called them up at Friday at 6 o'clock and said, hey, you offered me a tour. Can I come on in? And they were like, right now, Friday evening I think it was 6:15. And I was like, yeah, it's a great time. Meet me at the gate in 30 minutes. And they said, okay. I guess it was 6 o'clock. And they said, we'll meet you there in 30 minutes. And then I went up to Mike Flynn and Sidney Powell. I said, hey, I finally got us that meeting over at the White House. Come on, let's go. And they were like, you got a meeting with Trump? Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
I didn't really clue them in that it was a couple staffers meeting at the gate. And I got over, we got through the gates. The staffers saw us. They said, and of course, everyone recognized Mike Flynn, to be honest. They were I think they were happy. Everyone knew what was going on. Everyone knew that the country was being stolen. And there were a bunch of people in uniform at the gate who knew immediately we were there to help, obviously. And but they followed the procedures and the staffers got us in. And then once we were in, I'll never forget this. Once we were in the gates, General Flynn looked at me and I said something oblique like, we may he looked at me kind of with curiosity or like what, and I said, well, we may have to wing it from here. And he wears glasses. And you know how sometimes people with glasses, their eyes, when they get big, they get like, I'll never get him to look at me going, like, and then for a split second, and then he took the lead, boom, 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 boom. We 30 minutes later, we're outside the Oval Office. We sort of bounced around some offices and such. We got outside the Oval Office. He was talking to someone down the hall. Yeah. And I stuck my head around the corner until I caught what a lucky break. Donald Trump at, was it 8 o'clock at night, I guess? Walking by.
Yeah.
Second?
I was to say, you said lucky break. I'm going, it might have been a little bit of a divine appointment. You had an appointment. Wasn't in the calendar. It was
somebody. I kicked myself that conversation over and over and over. I tried at the very end to try to tell the president the story that was in that magazine, but it was 12:15 at night, and it was just as we were leaving, and he was shaking hands, and I said, sir, I need to tell you, Barack Obama had me bribe Hillary Clinton $18 million. And he says, what? And then the attorney was like, what is he talking about? Oh, and it was 12:15, and Trump was tired. It was a 4-hour unplanned meeting, and he said, Pat, it's too complicated. Good night. And he walked away, so I didn't get a chance to explain that story. But I knew there's been a coup going on since late 2015 because of the story that's in that magazine. And I don't know that Barack Obama's involved in it at all. I think that they used his name. That they used his name to get me, but I think it's Brennan. I think it's Brennan and Comey. Yeah. And they used his name with me to get me to do this stuff.
Wow. And to get you to do this stuff is detailed in this 80-page article, this tell-all. Get in there and get that book and get the details.